morning, world. This is Steve Rao on a special election edition of Roku and Pod TV's World Edition. We greet you from all around the world where we're going to dive in today and talk up at the elections. I greet you live from the All-American city of Morrisville. And as you can see, I just voted wearing the seal of the President of the United States. Some people at the polls thought I worked for the White House. It was fun to play the role as an advisor in intergovernmental affairs. But here I am as the host of this wonderful show. I wanted today to begin by saying we welcome you wherever you are around the world. And after these elections, we're going to continue our discussion of global affairs, innovation, the recession globally. And we're going to talk about Ukraine and Russia and other things as we continue to do that as we close out towards the end of the year. But election day is here. At stake, control of Congress, as Republicans can take the majority from Democrats by only flipping 5 seats in the House and 1 in the Senate, which is less predictable. The tight races we're watching today are Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, New Hampshire, and Pennsylvania, and races that could affect abortion access. We don't know when we'll see results, although North Carolina is also a tough race. Harry Beasley's Senate race is a tight race with Ted Budd, and that also could dictate the control of the Senate, along with Wiley Nickel, who is in a tight race with Bo Hines. We should also expect battles over voting laws and election integrity in the courts. Republicans have sued to disqualify thousands of mail-in ballots in at least 3 battleground states. And at the polls, Pennsylvania voters who had ballots thrown out are scrambling to recast their votes. Florida voters are navigating new laws and having dedicated elections police. And so we're going to see now today what is going to happen and whether the results, whoever wins these elections, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, whether they'll be recount results, and how long it will be. It could be, a week. It could be a few weeks. Just not sure. And we're going to talk about Russian casualties in Ukraine. Surviving troops and relatives of those called to fight are expressing anger that they were led to slaughter in poorly planned operations in East Ukraine. And a powerful storm is developing in Florida. We're keeping our eyes on that. And an antiviral drug could reduce the risk of long COVID. We're going to talk about that later in the show, maybe next week. But let's go ahead and get started with our team of analysts. I have with us Mark Lee, the co-producer, Wizard of Oz, Shaquille Adamer, and others who are joining. And let's just sort of dive in and talk a little bit about what's going to happen.
We've also got Lee Newton Rhodes and all in that line. I actually just came back from voting as well, so I got my vote in. It's definitely a thing that most of us need to be doing. If you did not do early voting, definitely get out there today and get in your vote, make your vote count, and all along those lines, because it is definitely a privilege that we have and that we need to have using regularly. I know that when I went there, was speaking as I walked in the door with one of the campaign, one of the voting officials and all of that. They were actually quite pleased with the turnout at our particular precinct, and that was with a 30% turnout of registered voters. So like I said, 30% during a midterm election is apparently something to definitely be pleased with, because I know that there have been times that it has been much lower than that. But, I'm actually hoping that there'll be a time, and I think Lee Newton Rhodes is hoping as well, that we'll be seeing folks think that a victory is something like 70 or 80%, or maybe even more than that, because I was actually somewhat surprised that they were pleased and quite pleased with that 30% turnout at that particular precinct. But like I said, I definitely am hoping that more people will get out and vote, and that we'll see even a greater turnout than is expected, because we do know that oftentimes midterm elections are the ones that have the lower turnout as opposed to the federal turnout and all in that space. But like you said,
Good morning, Mark. Any thoughts on that? Any thoughts on why such apathy when it comes to voting in the midterms?
I mean, my guess is that a lot of times the people that are voting are oftentimes thinking about the power structure and the importance of the national elections and the national offices. And of course, there's a lot of push around the national campaigns. And in that space, I think a lot of times, even though we have said here on this network, and I agree, and I've even said it several times, that at the end of the day, it is the local and regional candidates that actually have more of a direct impact.
100%.
But I don't know that the general public is as aware of that as they should be, and they get caught up in the shine and the politics and a lot of the kind of bells and whistles of the national campaigns, and that can draw people into the elections. And we do know that over the last several elections on both sides of the aisle, both the Democrat and the Republicans, there have been some very energetic and personality driven people that I think their personalities may have even exceeded their messaging. Because even though I may not be a Trump supporter, and even though I may have been an Obama supporter, I think that both of those individuals, as well as others that I can think of, including Reagan and Clinton, had a certain level of charisma that certain people in both sides of the political aisle currently don't have. So I do think charisma is something that drives national politics, and we've been seeing that ever since like the days of JFK and that kind of space. So
Mark, I agree with what you're saying, but I thought COVID would be a wake-up call that politics is local. The governor, the mayor drove the COVID policy strongly. I would hope that people would use that as a wake-up call and get out and vote.
I would hope so as well, but I know there have been a lot of pushes, different types of political aisles and different special interest groups to get out the vote. But I know that sometimes, and I think even Shaquille has spoken to this a couple of times, people are frustrated by some of the ways of the conversations and some of the natures of the conversations, and some of it is very divisive, and it can be intentionally done divisive, because I do think that there have even been some campaigns that have tried to drive wedges between different groups and try to get one group frustrated at another, and that divisiveness can also sometimes frustrate the general public, because at the end of the day, and I think it might have been one of the Democratic candidates, it could have even been Clinton, I think Steve mentioned at one time that, and I know I brought it up, a lot of times what we need to be concerned about is, and I think that's even what COVID was showing out, is what is the direct impact to individual economies, meaning individual folks and their personal economies. And I don't know that I'm hearing enough of the candidates talk about day-to-day issues that impact us, whether that's around things that can impact our grocery purchases, the gas prices, or a number of other things. I do agree with something that Shaquille had said a couple of times, that a lot of folks are getting caught up in the divisive issues and all along those lines. And some of those issues I may even have been involved with in some of their structure conversation, and I'm still involved with them. But I do know that on the political front, they can be divisive when at the end of the day, we're heading into a recession. A lot of people say that. So I think most people are concerned about
headed
impact in their pocket.
We're already there. That train is left already, left the station.
Yeah.
Well, I think that what's going to happen is that I think we're going to be surprised today. I think that that we don't know whether the polls are accurate. Polls have recently been off, so let's just see what's going to happen. I mean, I think it's clearly we'll know if Republicans really turn out, and today, then I think the Democrats are going to be in trouble. So I think we should know the turnout numbers and see, how many. And in North Carolina, the independent voters are going to be a big swing of things. Shaquille, what are your? I know where you stand on what you think is going to happen, but what do you think we should be looking for today, just in terms of, numbers and returns?
Can you just I'm going to be back. I'm going to be back in like 2 seconds. I'm actually on holidays, so just bear with me 2 seconds. I'm going to come back in on a different service. So I'll answer your question just in a moment, because I seem to be freezing up on this.
No
Steve, I just want to comment on what you said about polls being off. Unfortunately, I think sometimes polling is not to gauge public, but to shape public opinion.
Yes.
And to maybe discourage or encourage people to come and vote for whoever they want to vote for. Yeah. And it's not really an accurate picture of the landscape.
No, that makes sense. And that's been something that's been frustrating people as well, is polling and the nature of the polling. I've heard some people that have wondered, and I'd love to hear both of your thoughts. I was actually having a conversation with a dear friend yesterday who has been involved in politics, is actually involved in tech right now, and all in that kind of line. And we were actually thinking about this nature of maybe even some of the voting is ways that we do voting is antiquated, and will we get to a time when there is more electronic voting? And of course, there can be dangers around that, around security. But Steve, you're in the tech field to some degree with some of your consultants, but do you think that we'll ever get to a point where folks are not going to a polling place? And like I said, I did that earlier this morning. That's actually why I have the sticker on that says "No Bull." I voted because this is the Bull City. That's the nickname for Durham, and all along those lines. But do you think that we'll get to the point where we will have people voting like they did for American Idol and other stuff, and doing like electronic voting of one form or another, or is there
No,
too
I
many
don't think
security drawbacks?
No, we'll never get there. I think that because of the
Why not?
security, cybersecurity, just security laws in the state. I think that elections will always be. You can do absentee ballot voting. You can request stuff online, but I don't ever see
Anything other than in-person voting is flawed. So let's do facial recognition and let people vote from their phones.
Yeah, it'll never happen. I can tell you, it'll never happen. It's no way. I mean,
We
it's
do
hard
everything
enough
else
to
like
say.
that. We do banking like that. We do stock trading like that.
I know. Well, I think just there's always a criticism of, I agree with you, but I just feel like the reality is that the way the system is today, people will never allow that to happen because it would just be like, oh, you're going to have fraud. But, you never know. Maybe.
We can have fraud with paper ballots. That doesn't stop them. Mail-in ballots, that doesn't stop them.
But the interesting data that Brad Krohn gave yesterday, I found interesting. 5.5 million ballots cast and only 8 cases of fraud. And the 3 out of that was prosecuted. And they didn't find 1 case of fraud out of 5.5 million votes cast in North Carolina. And that's really accurate data. I did a fact checker on that, and it's quite amazing. So, but you have, people in North Carolina saying that there's election fraud.
Steve, and all due respect, the fact you don't find fraud doesn't mean there's not fraud.
Right.
Yeah, but the data of actual cases that were prosecuted, there was not.
No, I understand that. I understand that.
3 out of 5.5 million.
But if you would pay people to find fraud, whether lawyers or accountants or what have you, I think it would get different results. If you would actually reward people to find fraud.
Yeah,
I think the result would be much different.
They've made it a lot harder.
That actually raises an interesting question. I was just wondering both of your thoughts about this, because we've actually had a couple of them that have been on. I think Brad is one.
I am here. I am here.
As well and everything. But I was just wondering, do you think it's a good thing to have folks in the voting process that are quote unquote independent agents? Because I do know that there have been some folks, even Brad himself said yesterday that he is an independent agent with his consultancy and all along those lines. And can you really be an independent agent as a political figure? Can you represent if you're a Democrat or Republican and vice versa? Because like I said, Jan Cromartie, who's a dear friend of mine, was actually working for the Courtney Gills campaign and all along those lines. And I do know that he is a registered Democrat, but he's also a hired gun, meaning that he's going to do the campaigning for folks that are going to give him the money and all in that space. But I was just wondering, because Lee, you've worked on campaigns. Do you enjoy folks that are hired guns that are actually there to do the work, but they're there to do the work because you are paying them to do the work, not necessarily because they are on your side of the aisle?
I mean, it's accepted. Everybody has their biases. The only problem is, and unfortunately, I don't know how you can find this out. Not everyone's honest, and that's on both sides of the aisle. And that's why I'm not comfortable with anything other than in-person or facial recognition or something like that for people voting. Anytime you have paper ballots, especially through the mail, I mean, this has been Democrats and Republicans years back, you're open for fraud.
Yeah,
and the fact that someone's independent versus Republican versus Democrat doesn't stop them from not being honest people.
Right. No, I definitely agree with you on that. Speaking of that issue, and definitely want to stay on the political front because it is Election Tuesday, but there was another issue that was going on, and it actually ties into what we're talking about in terms of the ability of folks to have a good technical skills and good technical abilities and everything. But something that a lot of folks were waiting for, just like they were waiting for their stimulus check, is some folks had gone and made that $2 purchase because they wanted to win that big $1 billion Powerball that is out there. So
what's up with that? They couldn't draw it last night.
Waited, and then they found out that there was some technical problems. So now people are still waiting because apparently there's a technical glitch in the lottery ball. So apparently the Powerball website, folks are gonna have to wait later because there's some sort of technical glitch that they have had. So nobody knows who won, because even though it's the balls bouncing around and you're supposed to know who won and all in that space, there has been a technical problem, because what they said is because of a technical problem tonight, we are unable to bring you the Powerball drawing at this time. As soon as we're able to resolve the issue and conduct the drawing, it will be available on Powerball.com. And that's what the lottery host said to television viewers around the country. They were anxiously waiting to see if they were going to become the folks that Shaquille hangs out with, billionaires, and all along that line. But it looks like.
Speaking of Shaquille, look who showed up.
Hey, so what do you guys think about Georgia? Any
So,
thoughts? Shaquille, what are your thoughts about Herschel Walker's race?
yeah. So let me just come back to just a couple of points here. So, you've got an election coming up. Steve, you've talked about the poll results. There's going to be a few surprises. Yeah, there may be, but I'll tell you what I'll be surprised by. I think that the Republicans are likely to get, I'm going to pick it, if I had to bet on it, 53 seats. I think the surprise will be that they get more than 53. That's what I think the surprise will be. And the reason I say that is not because I'm anti-Democrat, as many people like to think I am. It's because I don't think that this particular administration and the Democrats in the last handful of years have actually responded to what Americans have been asking for. And it's the same thing around the world. People have been asking for things and they found themselves in a position where government has just not listened to them and people are voting them out. Lee raises a very good point. Democrats bitterly complained about mail-in ballots. Let's go to 2012. The Democrats were complaining about mail-in ballots being, clearly going to be something that there's going to be massive fraud with, in order to suppress the military vote for people that were serving overseas. Fast forward 8 years, and all of a sudden, any question at all about mail-in voting is all of a sudden some kind of threat to democracy. And lastly, when you say there's only been a handful of cases that have been prosecuted, Lee brings up a really good point. There's a lot of people that go missing every year. There's a lot of children that go missing every year. We know that statistically, those kids and those people, if they're not found within, 48 hours, a week, etc., the longer the period of time that passes, the more likely that person's been murdered. So the fact that you haven't found murdered people doesn't mean that it's not statistically likely that they would have been. And I think that the Democrats they've just missed the point here. Now, it's not just me that says that, though. What's really interesting is, over the weekend, over the last handful of days and over the weekend, Democrats, high-ranking Democrats, have all of a sudden started saying, oh, look, maybe we should have been more responsive to what the voters wanted. The voters and the public have repeatedly said that the thing that they care about the most is the economy, not abortion, not this sort of, faux horror at the threat to democracy, but the economy. That's the thing they care the most about. And Democrats haven't responded to that. So, look, this is not me being a partisan. I've talked a lot about why the Tories in the United Kingdom are probably going to lose power, why I think they actually should lose power. Okay, I vote for the Tories. I'm a Tory guy, right? But being impartial, they've done a very, very poor job, especially in the last few months. So I'm going to say the same thing here with the Democrats. They've done a poor job. That's just if you put aside your personal biases and you objectively look at what's happened over the last couple of years, and you objectively look at how polarized it's been, how divisive it's been, how hateful it's been, the shutting people down, the silencing people, the cancelling people. When you have a look at how one-sided that's been, this is not going to bode well. Now, if I'm wrong, fair enough. Hey, the majority of people in the country get to decide what happens. But I don't think that's going to be the case. The fact of the matter is that as it stands right now, nobody has any reasonable expectation the Democrats are going to hold the House. There's nothing unusual about that. Clinton lost a heap of seats. Obama lost a heap of seats. Trump lost a heap of seats. Right. But if we see a massive swing in the House, that's sort of a red wave. But if you see the Senate go to 54 or above, that's a red tsunami. And, I do think that Herschel Walker is going to do very well. I don't think that Stacey Abrams is going to do particularly well. But forget about those ones that are contentious. The fact that Hochul is doing so badly in New York, the fact that you're actually in a toss-up situation in Washington State, that's pretty scary stuff if you're a Democrat. That indicates to you that you're completely out of touch with what the American people actually want and what they're asking you for.
So what do you
Along those same
let's go
lines.
real quick? Here's my question: is and I'm going to ask all of you this. Okay, assuming Shaquille, and we really appreciate your analysis today. Assuming that happens and it's a red tsunami, or they get to the 53 or 54 seats, then you're in the situation room advising Democrats, the president, or other Democrats. What would the advice be? If Democrats get shellacked that bad, then tomorrow or Friday or next week, what is your advice? I mean,
there are a lot of issues that they've got to deal with that are not being dealt with, and some of them are issues that we've talked about even here on.
but how do
this
they win
network.
again? How do they win again? That's the
That's
question.
what I'm saying. In order to win, you've actually got to talk about those issues that are of concern to the public and the general public. And a lot of those, as we've been saying during this show and other shows, are around economics, but also things that are needed to be said about what's going on in the crime that is going on in the country. And there are other things that are maybe considered to be in the social justice landscape, but they are definitely impacting a lot of our country and things in that space. So we've got to make sure that they're talking about veterans' rights and that they're talking about what's going on with our homeless situation. That's actually a major issue that is taking place even in places like Los Angeles, where they could also face some very difficult times and all in that space. But these are issues that have to be addressed and talked about. And I'm not seeing enough of those conversations going on in the campaign. So you might have to go more of that addressing not just your base, because I think that that's too often what happens in the political conversations that are going on, is that a lot of folks are addressing only their base and not addressing those that are outside of the base. And that's for both sides, because I think Trump addresses way too much of his base. And I know that definitely the Democrats are addressing what they consider their core base and all of that. But the folks that are in that middle, as Shaquille was saying, and as Lee was saying, they're like, where is the message to me and everything? So we've got to actually address the messages to the folks that are in the middle and have some concerns about things that are happening, particularly on the economics. At the end of the day, it's about folks wanting to have things that are important to them and that influence them immediately, such as what's going on in their pocketbook and their pockets and all in that sense, and what's happening with them in the educational lanes, and definitely in terms of like bills, whether that's the rising cost of utilities, the rising cost of gas, and we're going to head into Christmas, so the gas is going to continue to go up and all of that. So those are things that have to be addressed and talked about.
Mark, it really depends on if the Democrats get a shellacking today, if they dig their heels in, or if they do it, in some introspection and say, where did we get it wrong? It depends on their attitude over the next, few months and few years.
Well, I think clearly in North Carolina,
So let's talk about a couple of things here, right? You've got a canned food over there called Chef something. I'm not familiar with it. I just happened to see a clip where a high-ranking Democrat responded to a question about how families should survive by suggesting that people eat this canned food, and that's
Chef
how they
Boyardee. I saw that.
To their cars. Yeah, how's it pronounced? Chef
Boyardee.
Boyardee, right?
It's like canned spaghetti.
So obviously, I'm not familiar with that over here, but I mean, you can't say something like that to people and expect
it's a lack
them
of empathy.
And then you've got one of the most senior Democrats, one of the most senior House Democrats. He walked back his comments about the world was going to end, but continued to suggest that this was that voting for Republicans was akin not only to ending democracy, but how Hitler rose to power. But then Democrats say, "Oh, but we're not being divisive. Like we don't understand why anybody would think we're being divisive." Okay, Obama has come out with these sorts of comments. Hillary Clinton's come out with these sorts of comments. What, democracy is going to end? So if in 12 hours from now the Republicans have won, should I start having a funeral for the United States? Your country has ceased to exist. I mean, this is the sort of rhetoric that the party has tried to drum up, and it's not helpful. But what I will say to you, Steve, to answer your question is, what should the Democrats do? What I think they should do is focus on those issues that really matter. One of the things that Democrats have been able to focus on, and the Labor Party in Australia has been able to focus on, and left parties have been able to focus on around the world, is the environment. And centre-right and right-wing parties have done a really poor job of it, because what they've done is, instead of actually discussing how to transition to renewable energy sources in a way that's going to be environmentally friendly overall and also cost effective, what it's ended up being is that the left has attacked the right and said, you guys, are just big oil, this and that, you don't care. And the right has, instead of actually saying we do care, especially if you think the right wing are, Christian conservatives, of course they care about planet Earth, okay, that God has bestowed upon them. But instead of them doing that, they've ended up defending fossil fuels. So for as long as the right-wing parties drop the ball on that, what the left wing can do, what parties like the Democratic Party in the United States can do, is to show how we're going to get there. Don't force technologies that you know aren't going to work because you've been lobbied, but actually talk about how you're going to get there. And when
They can't
people
do that,
bring
Shaquille.
up reasonable
They can't do that.
concerns about the technologies that you're suggesting, of course they can't do that, but the question was, what should they do?
Because
When
they do that,
people bring
then
up
there's accountability.
reasonable criticisms, instead of saying and stringing along something really long and crazy like the Sierra Club does, instead of saying, well, if you don't agree with solar panels, you must hate the environment. If you hate the environment, you must know that climate change disproportionately hurts people of colour. And people of colour don't have access to abortion as much as people who are white have access to abortion. So if you oppose abortion, you also oppose people of colour, which means that you oppose, climate change, which means that you're just all out a homophobic, sexist, racist, deplorable, etc. That's not going to work. It clearly hasn't worked. So if you would like to connect with people, stop calling them names. Stop attacking them. Start actually talking to them, not just about things that matter to them, but also talking to them about why they're not a bad person. Because if you're going to go out there and you're going to point at somebody and say, you're a terrible, horrible person who is irredeemable unless you're some sort of, unless you're on your knees, apologizing to us for the sins of the past, that's not going to work. That's not going to endear you to anybody, in my opinion.
Shaquille?
I'm sorry, Lee, if
I'm sorry, Mark. Shaquille,
my internet's dropping it out, so I apologize.
Just real quickly. So how did it go over when Biden said, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black?
Ooh, that was.
Well, apparently it works out pretty well, right? Because he not only did he win the election, but he's the most popular president ever. But here's something for you. Donald Trump would be the most popular person who ran for president who didn't win, but that doesn't get talked about, right? He
did get the most votes of a sitting president.
This continual, right? So this sort of continual attack on people that if you don't agree 100% with 100% of things that we say at all times and in all places, you are the enemy. I don't think that works, and I think people are sick of it.
You said,
and I think that the Democrats' position has been, what they've been running on lately is, if you don't vote for us and the Republicans win, then democracy as you know it has ended. That this will be a threat to democracy and our country will just be a disaster from here on in. If you believe in democracy, you should believe in the right of people to say, I don't think you're doing a very good job, and so I'm going to vote for the other party. And what I found very interesting is if you do watch Fox and you watch CNN, just compare the coverage. CNN, MSNBC, NBC, all of ABC, all those channels have basically been reporting that if the people of America vote the Republicans in, democracy is over. It's akin to it's akin to Hitler and the Nazis, etc. So that's what they've been saying. They've also been talking at length about how the Republicans wish to suppress the vote. And where have they been talking about? Well, just one example where they've been talking about how the Republicans want to suppress the vote is in Georgia. Then all of a sudden you watch Fox and you've got Tucker Carlson, you've got Sean Hannity, you've got Laura Ingraham, you've got The Five, you've got all those shows. And what are they saying to the people of Georgia? Get out and vote. Don't be complacent because you think it's going to be a red wave. You need to get out and vote. What are they saying to the people of New York? You need to get out and vote. So here you've got all these Republicans who are encouraging people to get out and vote, and the Democrats say, oh, they're trying to suppress the vote. Come on now.
But
Yeah.
Shaquille, a couple of things. One, I've heard some very, and I mentioned that earlier, some very divisive ads that try to pit one group against the other. That's kind of what the Republican ads were doing with the Asian vote, because they were trying to show that Asians were being impacted in a certain way by affirmative action, and it was not fair that certain groups got a more fairer advantage versus them, and meaning the Asians and all. And that's
Was it factual?
Very divisive ads that are out there as well. If you watch the ads and you see the way that the ads are framed and the way that the conversations are framed, they are done in a divisive.
No, hang on, Mark. You say that that's divisive, but it's interesting, right? Because I've been.
He froze.
He froze. I don't know if he's going to respond back.
I've been coming on here
Down the line,
since we
we're
started.
gonna talk
Right?
about, I'm going to be on Shasta Show for a few minutes before I head out because I've got to do a lot of campaigning today, lots of stuff to do. But we got Arizona, Georgia. We're all looking closely at those 5 states.
Oh yeah.
I think we'll start knowing by the evening, right, where we're going to do it.
Yeah, we'll know by the evening. But
Well, we used historically we would know by the evening, but now I guess counting continues for days, does it not?
Yeah, sometimes we
so-
might not know.
yeah.
Depends on how tight the elections are and what's going on.
So I think I dropped out there, Mark. So let me just quickly answer your question. So I've been on this since we started as a network, and I've always said the same thing. If you try to go down the path of one race matters, you're going to end up ostracizing other minority groups, and that's what's happened. I started talking about this stuff years ago about universities saying, according to Washington State, I'm white because people of my skin color are doing really well. So Steve and I are white. I mean, that's ridiculous. Okay, but this is what's happened. Of course, people are going to get their back up. Now, Steve, to your questions, I think Herschel Walker will probably win this. It's going to be a tough race, but I think he'll probably win it. The reality is that if Warnock was a Republican and he had, been alleged to have run over his wife's foot and all the other allegations he's had with what happened at those children's camps, etc., if he was a Republican, it just simply wouldn't fly. Now, the major group that voted in the last runoffs were predominantly in the area of Alpharetta. Well, he happens to be a footy player that played for Georgia. So I reckon there might be a few Bulldog supporters that actually like the guy. So I actually think that he'll probably get across the line. Arizona, I think Carrie Lake has got this, especially when you've got a Democrat that can't be bothered or is too frightened to debate her. And she wants to come out and say, well, I'm not going to debate her because she's going to attack me, she's going to spread misinformation, etc. But this is the same person that would not enter into a debate at the Democratic primaries either. So I don't think that's going to bode so well. I think that Zeldin has a real good chance in New York. I actually think, in my heart, he might win because I think New York, a lot of the people I know in New York are talking to me about it. I think they're just tired of all this sort of stuff because the 2 major issues are the ones that the Democrats are ignoring, the economy and crime. Let's go up to Pennsylvania. Fetterman might actually win it, but I think if he does, he's going to win it because of those early votes that happened before the debate. But if the decision is made because of the votes that come in after the debate, I think Mehmet Oz has this. So I think if you have a look across the line, I think the Republicans are probably going to do a lot of damage.
But there's something else that's going on that
Yeah.
people are not talking about. And I heard you, Lee, and we definitely wanted to hear what you got to say and everything. But, yesterday when we had our show and we had all those different people that came on, there was definitely another wave that is taking place that we have not been talking about because we're so busy spending time with the Democratic and Republican conversation. But there is, and I actually am supportive of it, even though some folks may say that Bo Hines would be part of this wave. Definitely, if Courtney wins, she would be part of this wave. But there is actually going to be a wave of young candidates that look like they are going to win this time around as well. As a matter of fact, I think that they have said that 2 House candidates, Democrat Maxwell Frost of Florida and a Republican Kaylene Leavitt of New Hampshire, could become the first Gen Z members of Congress if they win their elections. And it looks like they've got a strong possibility of doing that. As a matter of fact, Leavitt would set a record as the youngest woman ever elected to Congress if she can defeat Democrat Chris Pappas in their hotly considered race. But, a lot of times I think that we discount the voice of the young and all in that.
And that's a good point. Yeah. And I want to make a point. That's a good point, Mark. And I'll tell you, I get a lot of criticism now from the Democratic Party of laying it the way it is. But the way I look at it today in North Carolina, it's the Democratic leaders of this state many of them are over 60, 65 years of age. And the Republicans look a lot younger. If you go to a Republican Party, you'll see younger people. So they've actually done a better job, like Brad Crony yesterday, running a ground game, getting more younger people engaged, getting out there, getting people to understand the message. And, on this point, I'm going to agree with Shaquille Adler. Absolutely agree with them that I think that they've been so off message that they just have not focused in on gas prices, on inflation, on even if their plans were not right, even if at least to have an idea to say, this is what I would do better if I was in office. And because they haven't been able to answer that question, I think that's the thing, that at the end of the day, people aren't going to vote for Sherry Beasley because she's a nice person. We know she's a nice person. They're going to vote for her because they're going to go, okay, if she's U.S. Senator. And yesterday, I'm a supporter of Sherry Beasley, but I didn't hear her talk much about that in her remarks at a rally.
I think the issue. I think that the issue goes a little bit beyond that, though, Steve. I don't think the issue is just about the fact that one person might have a better idea than another person. I think it's that people are a bit frustrated that Democrats, and specifically Biden, Kamala Harris, the leading Democrats around the country, have basically they've either not even acknowledged it, or they've said it's not happening, right? And then they start calling everybody who disagrees with them names. Now let's just rewind a couple of years. Most Republicans, most centre-right people, and almost every economist I know, including left-leaning economists that come onto our show or onto our shows, said if the government goes out and spends trillions of dollars, it's going to cause inflation. Inflation happens, and all of a sudden we're told by leading Democrats that, well, yes, inflation has happened, but it's transitory. No, sorry. First of all, they said inflation wasn't happening at all. Then when it was clear it was happening, then it was transitory. The people said,
He froze
Oh,
again.
looks like we lost him. So it looks like
Hey,
the
Nick,
ratings in the
I'm
show are going to
glad-
start
Nick,
going
I'm
up.
glad that you popped in, because one of the other things that I was going to bring up, and I'd love to hear both you and Steve's thoughts, and even Lee's thoughts, and maybe Shaquille when he comes back, because we've definitely talked about this in past shows and everything, is one of the other things that they're saying that this Congress will do, maybe in addition to the Republican tsunami, is that it could quite possibly become one of the most diverse Congresses that we've had either as well. And I'm wondering folks' thoughts about that, because they're saying that in Vermont, that if Democrat Becky Bailiff wins her House race, she's going to become the first woman and the first openly LGBTQ plus politician to represent that state in Congress, and if Ballot wins all 50 U.S. states.
I don't think that's
Can I just finish what I was saying? So
I don't think race and sexual
you've got leading
orientation
bankers,
is
the people who are in charge, they're
anything
Goldman
that's gonna be able
Sachs.
to solve a problem.
You've got people who are in
Why
charge
is it
of Goldman
relevant?
Sachs, JP Morgan, et cetera, who are saying that the United States is going into a recession. And what do the Democrats do? The Democrats say, well, although this ordinarily would fit the definition of a recession, it's not really a recession. We're going to change the definition, and so on and so forth. The people have just been gaslighted on so many different issues, and really, I think you underestimate the intelligence of the American people. And Mark, I don't think you get it just with the question you just asked. People don't care what you're doing in the bedroom. I heard what you said. I heard what you said. I'm responding to what you said. I'm responding to what you said. Diversity. That's fantastic. She's a person. She's a person of color. She's LGBTQ. Blah blah blah. Nobody cares. All right? Do you think that Lee cares about what I do in my bedroom? I don't think he does. Maybe. I don't care what he does in his. I don't care what you guys do. So you can put that in my face. And the thing is that the American people have been telling you that. The American people have been telling you that year in and year out, and yet the Democrats just sit there and go, look, we found this other ultra minority group in this spectrum, and look how great we are because that person is now in Parliament, and this person is now in Congress. Look how fantastic we are, look how diverse we are. And everyone's sitting there going, hey, listen, I don't care. Do what you want to do, but can you stop making my life harder? And that's the worst thing. It used to be that Americans would say, could government make my life easier? Now Americans are saying, could you just stop making my life harder? That's a real problem. And it's a problem that is currently being attributed to the Democrats.
No, but Shaquille, but along those same lines, and I can agree to disagree with you, and and I'm going to come back to something that Nick just asked and everything, because definitely I do think that having representation does matter, and it looks like Vermont's going to be, because there was ironically, that's a very liberal state, was the sole outlier in the sense of not having any
Mark,
women.
when you say reputation, can you define that?
I'm going to bring up my point and everything, and then I definitely want to hear from you, Lee and Nick. But definitely, for a while, Vermont, which is where Bernie Sanders came from, was a very liberal state, and they were the only one that didn't have a woman representative. But that could change if this valiant woman wins and all of that. But I sometimes think that if it's going to be a bunch of old white men that are going to make the decisions that are going to impact folks of the minority status and everything, and they don't understand the culture and the background of folks from different races and are not going to address those issues from those communities, then yes, it is a problem.
Cry me a river. Cry me a river. No, Mark, again, because you love to play this card.
Different beliefs and different kind of orientations. They don't even have to agree with me. I like to have a variety of viewpoints. I think that's what actually the framers of the Constitution originally wanted. They wanted a diversity of viewpoints from everybody from the working class.
Of viewpoints, not skin colors.
Working in regular jobs to the higher end. And it was going to be a bunch of rich, white, older rich folks that are making the decision, then yes, hell yeah, I got a problem with that.
Mark, do you have a problem with Thomas Sowell or Walter Williams?
First of all, Mark,
they're the right color.
If you're going to start with what the founding fathers, if you're going to start talking about what the founding fathers wanted to do, what about the differences between Thomas Jefferson and John Adams? They totally disagreed on what sort of country the United States should have been. But let me just say something. You always want to talk about how representation matters.
It does.
But apparently, though, according to you, representation only happens if the person representing you looks like you. Now, I'm going to equate your politics to Australian politics. I have never voted for a centre left. Let me just finish my sentence. Can I just finish my sentence? Let me finish my sentence.
I didn't say they had to look like me in a damn bit.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you for that.
It sounded like that, Mark.
So I've never voted for a centre-left party in either the United Kingdom or Australia. I've never voted for the Labor Party either in Australia or in the UK where I could vote. However, out of the four of us that are here, of the three people other than me that are on right now, or four of us if Nick came back, the person here that would represent my views most closely, the person who would be better representation for me would be Lee out of the four people that were just here. Okay? Now, Lee's a Democrat. Lee's a New York Democrat who doesn't work in finance, who doesn't actually have all that much in common with me and is actually on some issues a lot more conservative than me and on other issues a lot more liberal. But he would represent me better. But according to you, what I should be doing is I should be saying, well, hang on, is there any Indians? Is there anybody of Indian heritage? Because if somebody's great, because I'm 10 generations away from India, if somebody else is also 10 generations away from India, and they happen to have a shared ethnicity with me, I should vote for them because therefore, just because of their blood, they're going to represent me better. Well, I don't agree with that.
No, all I'm saying
And you
is
sitting there saying, you sitting there reducing people. You sitting there now. You sit there, Mark. Mark, you have done it. Mark, you sit there time and time again.
In the Congress and in Senate, I want people that are represented that have come from the working class. I want people that have come from the rich class. I want people that are bringing different voices.
Mark, you do it time and time again.
Maybe that's
you reduce people down,
but that's what I want.
Mark, why can't you just have people who have your views?
You can want it. You can think that it's idealistic as much as you think that's idealistic. I think it's hell. Personally, I think it's hell because I don't want to be reduced down to those things. Yeah, well, but you don't live. You know what? You've had Mark, you've had your utopia for 2 years. You've had Biden sit there and say for 2 years, if you're a farmer, you're going to get funding if you're black, but not if you're white. You've had this racially divisive things for 2 years now. You've had it where people are going to be judged by things that they can't help. You've had that, and you know what you've got? You've got the American people in droves. You've got the majority of American people, including people. Blacks have now gone across the Republicans in America like they've never seen before. Hispanics have gone across the Republicans like you've never seen before. So people are sick of it. So you sit there and tell us all about the utopia you want to have, but at the end of the day, most people of colour, I'll rephrase that, a lot of people like me find that really offensive. Please don't reduce me down to my skin colour and tell me how I should think and feel. Please don't do that.
Yeah, but I think you have to take the collective experiences. I mean, I think what Mark is trying to say is that we don't want a U.S. Congress and a U.S. Senate of rich white men. You know, we want women, we want people of color, we want people of different experiences. And
Steve?
so I think you have to understand. Or let me finish.
Why?
I don't want to.
Steve?
This isn't a show about race either. This is we need to talk about the election. So I'm going to end this conversation.
Wait, check here. Steve, just one more quick comment. I personally wouldn't care if Congress is full.
Your party has made it about race, and now that you're looking like you're not going to lose, you're not going to win the election. Now, this isn't about race anymore.
No, I think you have to factor in race. I'll defend that. I mean, I think that you guys are fooling yourselves. If you look at the experiences of Black Americans that were enslaved and everything, we're not trying to say that white people are to blame for that. But I think you have to take into account.
You're not trying to say that. You're not trying to say that. Come on. Come on, Steve.
I mean, you have to take into account that they were deprived education and opportunities, and it's not everyone's starting at an equal playing field. And so I think you have to take that into account. I'm not saying that we do, you know, maybe you're right. Maybe it's overplayed.
I see. I see, Steve. And as no, Steve. No, I understand. No, Steve. No. I'll go with what you've said. No, I'll accept what you've said. I'll totally accept what you've said. That the experience of the African American community has not been so great, and they might have been starting from a further back starting point. I accept that what you've said. Yeah. Can I just ask you a question though? And like I've brought up before, because you are ethnically Indian, and so am I. Did the British just come over for my family, which moved to Fiji? Did the British just come over and say, "Hey, we've got this beautiful island in the South Pacific. Would you like to come on? We've got the great homes for you. Come on in." No, many people around the world have been through some much worse experiences. And where I grew up in semi-rural Western Australia, I was the only person, not just in my class who wasn't white, not just in my school who wasn't white. I was the only person in my entire area that wasn't white, other than my mother. You expect me to sit here now and say, because I've managed to get myself through that and be successful, that I'm supposed to say it is perfect perfectly reasonable in Washington State that my child does not get to get a position at a university because somebody else who has my skin color has done well and somebody else who's an African American has not done so well? Is that what I'm supposed to say to my nieces and nephews that moved from Fiji to the United States, where it took them 15 and 20 years to get over there? Is that the position that I'm supposed to have? No, clearly not.
No,
But according to you guys, whatever race you happen to preference at the time, that's the one that matters. And the rest of us be damned. And if you don't get that, I think you might start to consider it after you lose this election. After you lose these midterms, as badly as the polls suggest that you're going to.
What, Jack, first off, what you need to understand is nobody loses in this election, regardless of what anyone says. The problem is we stay divided. And they do that on purpose because as long as we stay divided, they can control us. And I am hoping that our younger generation will step up to the plate and they will go, we are no longer going to be playing this party game. We don't want party favors. We want humans in office. But to sit there and say these things, if somebody wants to come to America, then let them come to America and learn and decide for themselves what it is that they want or what it is that we have for them. But nobody has any one answer here. Okay. Nobody. And everyone suffers their own pain.
I've got one answer, Kimberly. I've got one answer. Let everybody treat everybody equally. Treat everybody equally and fairly.
Shaq, we're supposed to be here to talk about the campaign, and I want to put Steve back on to talk about the campaign.
Well,
but as long as we continue suffering our pains, we'll never grow. So we need to stop suffering our pains and face our facts and future and grow, no matter how painful it is. And you know what, Steve? Get us back on track. Thank you.
Well, yeah, we'll get back on track. And I think the key right now, we've only got a few minutes left. Thank you, Kimberly. I think that we're going to talk about, there's been some issues about climate change and some studies that will come back. We're going to talk about that after the election. I think right now we got to hone in on, we'll know by this evening, maybe not as soon as this evening, but it looks like Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, North Carolina, all of these are battleground states. And we'll see whether, to get us back on track, if the Democrats lose, it's going to be because it was about the economy and a president whose approval ratings have started a little bit. And if they win, then the polls were off. And, maybe they're going to have a chance. And we'll see. It does look like they're probably going to lose the House. I do think in North Carolina, if the Democrats do lose, I do think it's time for them to reassess their strategy as a party. Roy Cooper is only going to be here for 2 more years. As Brad Crone said, I think that the ground game that I've been seeing has been very aggressive with the Republicans in terms of precincts and field directors and everything. So it's a new ball game. And if it is a shellacking and I were Josh Stein, I would take a serious look at kind of like the people that I bring into my inner circle if he does want to be governor, because, I think that it's going to be interesting. So I think North Carolina is going to have to really assess.
I know we're wrapping up and everything, but there is another issue that one of our other co-hosts on the network oftentimes talks about, and it has been an issue that will be a very much of a battleground issue kind of thing, because there are apparently 5 states that are in their decisions going to decide what they're going to do with marijuana on this particular election day as well. And we do know that Weed Wednesday is tomorrow, and that is hosted by one of our cohorts. And definitely there are several states, including Arkansas, Maryland, Missouri, North Dakota, and South Dakota. And they're going to be looking at decriminalizing marijuana. And it's even come up as an issue here in North Carolina. I know that in talking to Courtney Gills on the second show that she was being on, because she was on our new show, and then she appeared on the radio show with me, that she said she is open to those conversations. And definitely Valerie Fouché has said that she thinks that it could be an economic engine here in our state. So definitely that is an issue that we have not brought up that might be interesting to see how that plays into the political structure as well, because it does look like this is going to be an issue that is going to be discussed for a while, and it might even be on the national ticket eventually. But there are voters in those 5 states that'll be deciding whether to legalize that particular product, and all along those lines.
Right. And so we'll know. Hopefully, I'll be calling in today at 8 o'clock, depending on where I'm at. I'm going to be going to multiple places. I'll try to get on my phone for a few minutes, and probably when I get home around 10, I'll chime back in to enjoy the returns with you all.
Steve, what do you keep up with the polls pretty good? What do they look like right now?
Well, I just said at the beginning.
Yeah,
I'm
man.
sorry. I just said at the beginning, I just voted. And when I went there, I asked the election person, and there was a 30% turnout at my particular precinct. And that sounds like that was the going kind of numbers. And they actually said that was high for this particular midterm election.
So,
I voted today at 30 minutes.
Let me ask you a question here in relation to turnout. Let me ask you a question in relation to turnout. So people who are either Republican or independents or Democrats are going to vote Republican for the first time, they've got
God frozen.
Right.
Voice, God has spoken.
Okay.
the people who vote Democrats. What are they
Steve, go
supposed to do?
ahead.
They're supposed to say yes, we want more crime, we want more of the same. What are they going to turn out to vote for?
Yeah, well, let me answer your question, Kimberly. I mean, when I went to the polls, it took me 30 minutes to go through. I tried to early vote. The lines were too long both weekends. It was hard to tell whether they were more Republicans or Democrats. But I think in North Carolina, the polling, in terms of polling data, Democrats have the lead in early vote. The question is, can they keep the lead? And will the Republican turnout be larger? And I think in North Carolina, you're going to see larger turnout in the rural areas of the state. And I think that's where the Democrats have trouble. If those Republicans turn out in high numbers, then they'll close the early voting lead. And you see that over time in these elections. You know, in 2020, Dale Folwell was losing to Ronnie Chatterjee by like 10%. And by 10 o'clock at night, when the returns started coming in, you saw Falwell hit 53%. You know, those votes were coming in from those rural areas. So I think that's going to happen.
So the rural voters.
What?
The rural voters whose votes are normally suppressed, they're going to turn out in higher numbers. Is that what I'm understanding from what you're saying?
In North Carolina, rural areas are more Republican, and so you have higher pockets of Republicans, and if they turn out, then I think on today, then they'll win. You know, that's the question.
They have the mail-in ballots as a backup.
I was taking a cheap shot, Steve. I was taking a cheap shot. Lee, over to you.
A cheap shot and everything. The last thing I was going to mention is just really quickly is that you know, one of our favorite people is said that if things go the way that he is expecting and all of that, that he may launch his presidential campaign as early as a week from today in Florida. So that was announced today that Trump did say that he might make that big announcement on November 15th, which would be a week from today. So maybe we are heading toward a Biden-Trump rematch. And
Well,
all of
you know,
that.
one of the things I have learned from the last election we went through, if the Republicans get their way, they certainly throw a big fit. And I certainly would hate to see, you know, some of our state.
Oh, Kim, come on now. And what the Democrats say, come on now.
That people learn to shake hands and say, thank you very much. That was a good game. And we'll get you next time. You know, like the boys were taught on the baseball field.
Just like your party did in 2016.
That they don't know how to do anymore. Yeah, I don't think, you know what, I don't think Trump ever played ball.
Just like Democrats did.
Doesn't know.
It's time to close out.
Just like Democrats did in 2016, right? Yeah, just like that. Just like Stacey Abrams did in Georgia.
Shaquille, but how do you do that when someone's calling you Hitler? You shake their hand?
Yeah, you do. You take the upper road. So, Steve, close us out.
Yeah, it's time to close out. I'm gonna go on Sasha's throw for a few minutes.
This isn't about one-upping. People need to grow up. So go ahead, Steve.
I agree with I agree 100% with that. Sometimes it's not easy though.
Today. We'll see you tonight. Mark, send the email out if you could, and we'll see you tonight. Hopefully, I'll be there, but if not, I'll be there by 10 o'clock. And I'll try to kick it off from my phone. Polls are open until 7:30 in the evening. We will have an opportunity to discuss the results and as the returns come in. And please get out to vote, regardless of what party you're in. It's your right in the Constitution to exercise your right to vote, and let's work hard to see what's going to happen in this election. I know the President of the United States is watching very closely of what's happening in the country, Joe Biden, and hopefully he will know what his future looks like, either a rematch with Mr. Trump in a year, which the campaign will begin in January of 2023. Thank you all so much, and may the light and love of our hearts always live to the darkness. See you this evening.
Take care. God bless.